Hello YouTube, this is Sniper's End, and today we're watching another video from 2011. This was recorded about 2 weeks before I went to boot camp on November 17th. It showed some of my progression to area defense and free-for-all. I kept the recording because the ending is pretty awesome. Moving along to our regularly scheduled program, today we'll be talking about the USS Pueblo. With North Korea in the news so much lately, I decided that the Pueblo would be a great idea for our first unrelated COD. This is a chapter in the Cold War that isn't very well known, but in January of 1968, while the war in Vietnam was raging, the North Koreans staged several international incidents. It started on January 21st when North Koreans sent commandos across the demilitarized zone in an attempt to assassinate the president of South Korea. Of the 31 commandos, 29 of them were killed, 1 was captured, and 1 made it back to North Korea. They killed 30 people and injured 66 others, but they failed to assassinate the president. Meanwhile, in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of North Korea, the American spy ship, the USS Pueblo, was gathering electronic intelligence and spying on the Soviet Navy. They were not informed of the attempt on the president of South Korea. The day after the attempt, the Pueblo was challenged by a North Korean ship. After being ordered to stand down or be fired upon, the Pueblo started evasive maneuvers while the ship's crew attempted to destroy all the classified material on board. Over the next several hours, many more ships and North Korean fighter jets tried to get the Pueblo to stand down. Finally, the North Koreans opened fire on the Pueblo. One of the ships fired a 57mm cannon, and the boat was fired upon by several machine guns. In the attack, one of the ship's mates were killed, and the commander was wounded by shrapnel piercing his rectum. The Commander Booker, saw the situation as hopeless and decided to surrender the ship because he thought that a prolonged fight would only result in more of his crew being killed to no end. So on January 22nd, 1968, Commander Booker became the first commander to give up his ship without a fight. After the Pueblo was captured, the crew was taken as prisoners of war by the North Koreans. The United States government and the North Korean government started talks to release the prisoners, but for almost a year, the 82 members of the crew were held captive. In their captivity, the men were tortured by the North Koreans both physically and psychologically. Shortly after being captured, Commander Booker was forced to write a confession that he invaded North Korean waters so the Koreans could justify taking the ship. To force Booker to do this, they beat him over the course of several days before they pointed a gun to his head and said, "Write a confession or die." When Booker refused, they pulled the trigger, but the gun did not have any ammo in it. Eventually, Booker did tape and write a false confession. While in captivity, the men kept up the fight against the Koreans. The men were forced to take a picture together to show the world that they were alive and in good health. In this picture, every single man is flipping the bird. They told the North Koreans that this was a symbol of good luck in Hawaii. 2 months later, the picture was shown in the Times, and the North Korean found out that they had been duped. Afterwards, they increased the intensity of the torture on the POWs in retaliation. One man's courage was especially evident in captivity. While all the men were beaten several times, Sergeant Robert Hammond of the Marine Corps was tortured to a further extent than the rest of the men because he refused to submit to the North Koreans. From Hammond's Silver Star citation, realizing that many of his shipmates were in danger of being permanently injured or killed, Sergeant Hammond willingly attempted to sacrifice his own life in order that his shipmates might be spared further torture. The following day, the North Koreans ceased their beatings and torture. The talks between North Korea and America ended with a strange conclusion. The North Koreans required that the United States admit that it was spying and affirmed that they would not spy in the future. They also required an apology from America. But in a true show of statesmanship, they apologized directly after saying that they were only apologizing because it was required to secure the release of the captives, and they verbally retracted their ransom admission. It was good enough for the North Koreans, though, and the 82 surviving members of the Pueblo were released on December 23, 1968. After the release of the captives of the ship, Commander Bucher's story came out, and he was vilified by the military community for giving up his ship without a fight. The American people were split on the issue, but some were happy to see someone who refused to give up lives needlessly in the context of the Vietnam War. Commander Bucher was recommended for a court-martial. A major reason he was recommended was because of all the classified information and hardware on the Pueblo. Very little of it was destroyed before the Pueblo was taken. The crew had very little training on the destruction of the material, and not only that, but there was a lot of unnecessary material on board that was impossible to destroy in the time they had. The only thing that stopped Bucher from being court-martialed was the Secretary of the Navy stepping in and saying that Bucher had suffered enough. The North Koreans were very bold during the Vietnam War because they didn't think America would start a war with them while they were also fighting Vietnam. The North Koreans were correct, and America did not take any military action against North Korea. To this day, the USS Pueblo is still in captivity in North Korea, where it is today known as the Victorious Fatherland Liberation War Museum, where Koreans are taught that North Korea won the Korean War, and they're taught Korea's version of the Pueblo incident, where it was captured because it was invading North Korean territory. Thank you all for watching.